get
And
to
then
stop him.
he says to Steve, isn't it a bit of a waste of time to argue for a God or against a God when there are multiple gods, thus eventually driving every conversation about any God end up with God hiding in the gaps?
I leave that to that should be to them. They're the theist.
Yeah, I did kind of think it was a
yeah.
question that we should. And so what you know, if I'm interpreting this question right, Siggy, and I so appreciate what you've done here today. I would just say that this is why we are both what you would call classical apologists. Apologists have these different methodologies. There's a great book from Zondervan's Counterpoint series called 5 Views on Apologetics. And there's also Avery Dulles' History of Apologetics goes through these maybe with different titles, but we are classical apologists, and what, so think of someone like Gary Habermas or Michael Licona. They're evidentialists, and in a certain sense, as opposed to presuppositionalists, we're evidentialists. But if you took someone like Gary Habermas or Michael Licona and compared them to someone like William Lane Craig is a classical apologist, they're evidential apologists, and the difference there would be that the evidential apologists like Gary and Mike, you never hear them arguing for God's existence. They think if they can demonstrate a good case for the resurrection of Jesus, you get God ipso facto, the God of Israel, the God of Jesus, who Jesus was risen to vindicate, those claims in part. So you have that. But on the classical view, we say, well, you have a much stronger case for the resurrection if when you come to approach the elements that we would use to argue a case for the resurrection, you already believe there's a power sufficient to raise someone like Jesus from the dead. So you argue first for God, that is that power. And the way I've made this point, and I did make it in the Matt Dillahunty debate, is like, what if I encountered a group of people who were sitting around talking about how they just saw a guy walk on the moon? And let's say I knew nothing about NASA, and I knew nothing about space exploration, and I knew nothing about the moon being, man landing on the moon or anything like that. So I would find this ridiculously unlikely when I heard this statement being made. But what if then I left there and I had a conversation with somebody else who informed me, and I was given evidence to believe that actually there is this sufficient power to put a man on the moon called the space program. Various countries have space programs. America has one, and now Elon has one, and Jeff Bezos has one, and everybody else. But let's say I found out there was a power sufficient enough to put someone on a moon, sufficient to put a man on the moon. And there was this guy in the 1960s or the 1950s running around saying that he was going to be on the moon, and just watch his life and see what happens. Well, now it's a little different than the evidentialist alone would have it, because you've got to make a case that God raised Jesus from the dead before you've shown that there is a God that's capable of doing something like that. And so the classical apologist, whether Steve or any particular atheist goes along with this, the methodology is, well, show first that there's a God, then you have a better case for the resurrection because you have that power. And so we would never leave it merely at a case for theism broadly that we would have out of something like a contingency argument or a teleological argument. We would then follow that with a case for the resurrection, or in some way that Jesus was divine, and then that would leave you not with just,
Can I have a little say on this question?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like there's two kinds of atheists, and a lot of the YouTube space is either debates between Christians and other monotheistic religions, like Christians with Jews or Christians with Islam. So Judaism, Islam, Christianity kind of occupy that space. So for the Christian to argue for those kind of gods, because you're trying to convert, there's a point. Atheists are divided into two basic camps, and then, of course, Christianity versus atheism is a popular debate. But the atheists seem to divide in two camps. They're kind of like, I'm not really here to change anybody's belief. I'm just going to show you why my belief is superior. But if you want to believe in Christianity, that's fine. And then you have the atheists they will say that we are evangelists for atheism. Mm-hmm. And so for them, the vested interest is that
that's the way it's presented anyway.
Well, no, I've heard them say that I'm an evangelist for atheists. So they're campaigning for that. So they're not just interested in the debate to say, here's a superior way to look at the world versus the Christian or versus the Muslim or whatever. So you have two types of atheists: ones that are interested in the conversation for its own sake in the debate, and then those who are trying to evangelize the same way Christians are. For the agnostic, I have never seen an agnostic take the position that you should be agnostic too.
Yeah, I'm not an evangelistic agnostic. Yeah, for that.
Right.
I don't go around, hey, look, you need to be an agnostic. Let me explain to you why. Yeah, no, I don't do that. It just works for me. But I mean,
you don't see agnostics crusading for agnosticism in the way that you see Christians crusading, and I use that loose in a metaphorical sense. Right.
Although I tell you, by the way, I'm Jewish. I should start that. Jews for agnosticism. I can make a fortune. Yes. I got
We
this.
can't
I got
support
this,
you,
man.
Steve, but that's very industrial.
No,
You
so
love the
just-
Jews. Everybody loves the
Yeah,
Jews.
I do love the
Judaism is a
I love my
thing,
heritage.
okay?
This is a channel that
I
loves
love-
Jews.
Yes, I do too. I love my heritage. I really do.
Okay, okay. We beat that one to death. I think.
Yeah, I think the stakes are different for Steve.
Can I
and for
Yeah.
us.
Can I add this?
Go
real
ahead.
quick?
I'm
'Cause
sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
I appreciate. I like the evidential view. I don't like the precept view. When precept came onto the internets, a decade or whatever ago, it was me and of course Ozzy, the wonderful Ozzy Rambius II, and other people that were arguing, explaining why precept was not really a good argument. And so I liked the people like Plantinga, who at least tries to argue from Reformed epistemology that theism is rational. He's not arguing so much, hey, look, believe in God. He's just arguing that the belief in God is a rational position. I find that to be a worthwhile discussion, because a lot of people say, well, believing in God is irrational. Well, have you read Plantinga's argument? I think there's some issues with Plantinga, but at least he attempts to take it from not just an evidential point of view and not a precept view, but basically a epistemological view that belief that God exists is rational. And I think that's a way to go. If I was a theist, that's how I would do it.